Coogs house, Houston falls 42-14 to Kansas in the year 2024. Not the year 2022, the year 2024.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, a podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Today is going to be a post-game reaction episode. It'll be a little live, a little quick. If you can't hear little man screaming in the background, I'm sorry. All right, I'm happy for you. I'm sorry for I don't know which one you'd rather have. But he's screaming not because Houston lose Kansas 42-14, but probably because he wants dinner soon. So we're going to get through this and talk about this a little bit and react some before getting to that. Now, I got to say, I knew that Kansas was better than the normal 1-5 team. I didn't necessarily know that Houston was in for that one. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I wouldn't recommend taking the over in any game Houston's anytime soon, but I'd recommend going to FanBook to do it, whatever you want to do. I want to talk about a couple things in this one and fly through things. I want to talk just some instant reaction kind of stuff. Fill the comment section with whatever you like. I'd say keep it PG, but I get it if you don't want to. We're also going to talk some about the QB switch, quarterbacks mixed up in this game, causes, results, what it could mean, etc. Horrible start. I mean, the game started pretty bad, to say the least. And then I also wanted to take a look around the Big 12. It's only halfway through the slate on Saturday. Pretty big game Friday night in the Big 12. I maintain the Big 12 should be a 2 playoff team conference right now, at least. But we're going to get through all of that. Houston, as we mentioned, said that Houston loses 42-14. And again, 2022 Kansas was really good before the Jalen Daniels injury. Last year's Kansas was pretty good. This year's Kansas was 1-5 coming into this game. Houston conceded 467 yards of offense. And I had to say that if you were going to tell me Houston loses this game, that was not going to be how I would have had it. Even in my most, I think I opened up the week talking about how Houston could lose this game, even though Kansas had a pretty bad record. I don't mean to say I never thought they could lose this game, but I always had it being like a 21-14 kind of loss. And admittedly, that would have won the game for Kansas today. But Kansas had 21 first downs. They had 247 through the air, 220 on the ground. Just an absolute fall apart by the defense. I know people want to talk about the offense and talk about the offense play calling and talk about the picks, talk about this, talk about that. You thought coming into this game you could hang your hat on the defense. And from the opening drive, they were just not ready to play. Houston conceded a 9-minute drive and gave up points in the very first drive, and that was pretty bad. And then they turned around and turned it over right away. And Kansas scored on a 50-yard bomb. And it was like, oh, it's going to be one of those kinds of games. And I feel like the offense has got obvious problems. Those have been the kind of problems we talk about all year long. The defense has been the high point. And the defense, frankly, is the reason why they won the TCU game. I know Zeon Chriss played really well, but defense is the reason why they've been competitively in games for as long as they've been in them. And in this one, it let them down in a big way from the jump. And so as we look at this game across the board, you could talk about the defensive line play. I saw a lot more Kendra Gant in the game than Jamal Morris. I don't have a snap count sheet in front of me or anything like that, but there was some linebacker questions I had going on there, and I wonder if there was, I don't know if you can hear that in the background or not, if there were some potential problems with play or with health or something, but I think Jamal Morris has typically been better for us in that. Michael Batten didn't have his best day by any stretch. Make sure I get the box score with the tackle numbers right here. Batten had 4 total tackles. He's usually up closer to 8, 9, 10. That's, I think, indicative. Kentrell Webb leading the team in tackles is good for him, except it's bad when you realize it's 7, and he's also playing as a deep safety for a lot of the game. That's indicative, I guess, of what level of the defense the Kansas team was getting to. Got comments flying in here. West Virginia is here. Hey, West Virginia, how we doing? We got from Agus, still rebuilding, not enough to compete. This team's not even good enough to beat a weakened team because they can't. That's his PG response. Also says ready for basketball. Ronald balances the team gets weak it gets worse each week. This is an embarrassment. I will say, while that was an embarrassing game, I actually thought they got better leading into the TCU week. And remember, TCU beat that Kansas team by double digits. And so I actually think they got worse in the last 2 weeks, or they played a lot worse today anyway. I don't know. I would say get worse week to week. Ronald also has criticism for recruiting. I think, I know at least one podcaster, hint, nudge, nudge, it was me, that mentioned when they did the big coaching change, you were going to lose a lot of talent because a lot of the talent on the roster considered themselves Dana Holgorsen guys. And say what you want to say about Dana, and say what you want to say about the way they played, and say what you want to say about who he couldn't get to recruit. The guys that liked him were really loyal to him, and you had a lot of guys leave when he left, right? And so they didn't follow him, obviously. I guess Akeem July did at TCU. But guys that go to Colorado, guys go to Texas, guys go to Miami, those guys are all making plays. So, got to rebuild the roster, got to get the right guys on the bus. Don't have that done yet. Opening game plan by Kansas. I guess that'd be fair. Opening for Kansas went well. They scored on a big, long drive to open the game. I look at that and I think, I guess, fair, give credit where credit is due. I also look at that and I think, why didn't Houston ever get off the plane? I don't think there was a whole lot that they couldn't keep up with schematically. It just looked like bad pursuit, bad tackling, and that kind of stuff defensively. I do want to get into talking some about the quarterback switch and what that could mean for the program. I want to talk about the team having bad starts in general. We'll see how much time we got for the Big 12 and those kinds of things. But this team needs a boost. And if you need a boost, let's face it, everyone needs a boost every now and then. Time to stop worrying about your performance. Go get him so you can feel confident, knowing you can stay there whenever you're in the mood. Hims has access to a wide range of doctor and trusted ED products that can get you pumped up like Houston needs to get pumped up. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe Houston needs Hims. Chewable mints, Viagra, Cialis, and other generics up to 95% cheaper. No insurance needed. One low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/lockedon. Products mentioned are chewable, compounded products that are not approved by or verified for safety effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details. Important safety mentioned. Subscription required. Price varies on product and subscription plan. Parker answered the Locked On Coogs here, breaking down the game, and he just says after that ad read that the Houston Cougars, well, they weren't him, that's for sure. And I like that segue onto Utah. Here's the funny thing is and assuming they're going to get better after the TCU game, would have thought that Kansas, being a 1-5 team that TCU beat by double digits, could have been a win. Utah is spiraling, has no quarterback, could have been a win. Baylor in the season, I think, could have been a win. You're looking at like 5-ish wins, and that's a whole different season. Instead, big step backwards today for the Houston Cougars. Now, in this game, Houston actually saw 3 quarterbacks play. Zeon Chriss started the game. He got taken to the blue tent, but then came back and played another series, and then was subbed out after that series. Donovan Smith came in and led 2 straight touchdown drives and looked like things were moving pretty well. He then proceeded to throw 3 interceptions throughout the rest of the game. Well, I would argue that he didn't play as horribly as indicated by that stat line. Smith did finish 15 for 24, 173 yards and 2 touchdowns with 3 interceptions. He certainly didn't play extremely well or anything. He had 2 great drives to start. He looked more mobile than he had in the past. But overall, he had 14 rushes for 45 yards. And when you factor in that several sacks as well, I think that's worth pointing out. But on the whole, Houston offense stalled with him as well after the first 2 drives with him. Oyale did get in for a final drive at the end of the game. 3 for 5. One of those threes was a batted ball that was picked up, kind of functioned like a hook and ladder. The biggest play from scrimmage for him was that play, and then the other play was he had a short completion, but it took a rough in the passer play that, to his credit, he got up right afterwards and acted like nothing happened. He got blasted. Gotta love that, frankly. And then they, marched down the field, got inside the 5, and could not score. Went for it on 4th down from inside the 5, could not score. So all 3 guys had disappointments. Donovan Smith threw the only 2 touchdowns of the game, and so I guess technically he played the best. But the truth is that the only guy who I would definitively argue played well in this game, I guess I could say 2, even though one didn't get many chances. Mekhi Muse, I thought, played pretty well in this game. 6 catches, 99 yards, and a touchdown. He had the big bomb, right, a 52-yarder. And then Joseph Manjack had 3 catches for, I guess he finished at 27 yards, but one of his catches was 33 yards. He had a negative 6-yard catch, and then a 0-yard catch as well. But I wish he got more opportunities. On the whole, though, the quarterback played in the rotating of quarterbacks, right? That's what we're sitting here in this segment to talk some about. And Zeon came in the game and did not look ready to play the game. And I understand he's younger, right? I actually think he's a lot younger than Donovan Smith when you factor in COVID years and red shirts and so on. And I understand that he came in the game, was his only a second start at Houston. And frankly, it was a start against a defense that knew he was the starter, and that does change things in college football, right? But on the whole, he looked a step slow. His reads looked like they were taking him a long time. And when I think through the game, I have trouble thinking of moments where I'm like, well, Zeon's making a positive difference on the game right here. And so I don't know, and I have texted, I have asked people, I'm not going to get a straight answer because why would you? I don't know if he was taking the game entirely because of performance or because of injuries. Again, like I said, he went to the blue tent, came out and played another series, and then never came back in the game. But I do think that his performance didn't feel like they were missing him. Donovan Smith, Donnie football, came in there at the next 2 drives, scored 2 touchdowns, and frankly looked pretty good in doing so. Again, had 1 big bomb to Muse. He had some nice runs, evaded pressure. And then after that series, he had a couple nice runs after those 2 series, but ultimately kind of reverted back to, from a passing perspective, kind of more of the Donnie of old. If I'm banking on what I think happened here, I would look at the fact that they went to halftime and came out, and Donovan Smith looked like a lot more like his old self after halftime. Feels like Kansas probably had some coaching points to kind of reemphasize that Donovan Smith was in the game at halftime to kind of get ready for that. I will say he looked more mobile if you're trying to find positives. But on the whole, a couple questionable decisions. I said earlier when I said that he threw 3 picks, I don't know if I necessarily credit him with like the most fault on all of them. The pick that comes to mind when I think about that is the deep one down the left sideline. They had a reverse flea flicker in which Donnie wheeled back and had just 1 route downfield. It was a Malik Carr, our 6'9" tight end, going down the left sideline. And you had, with Malik Carr running, you had, I guess he was kind of bracketed, low and high with the Kobe Bryant kid high. And on the high side of that, he threw it into the middle of the field. Typically, you're trying to get that out of bounds, where if it's not your guy catching, it goes out of bounds. Especially when you have a 6'9" guy, you're trying to get, use that full frame like Malik Carr has. So I would say the ball wasn't well thrown because it came more to the middle of the field, more infield, as opposed to hitting the sideline. But I also don't think Malik Carr played it very well. Without trying to be too judgmental on effort, it certainly didn't look like he played the ball till after it was caught by the defense. As opposed to trying to get up there and high point the ball, or trying to get our hands on the ball before it gets caught. And so that's one of those moments where it's just like everyone's playing bad, and we don't need to say only one guy was playing bad. And so I think that's important to remember here. On the whole, though, it seemed like very, very clear that Kansas was willing to live with whatever Houston did throwing the ball, and was going to try and keep Houston from running the ball, right? So that was going to be a problem. I don't think Wheeler came into anything worth noting. Like I said, he played tough, played hard, best play was a batted ball that ended up back in Houston's hands. I know a lot of people clamor for him every time he steps on the field. We'll see how people react to his play there at the end. I guess they did move the ball some, but it didn't necessarily feel like from things he was doing. I will be interested to see what this week looks like as far as what Houston does if they go to a true traditional 2-quarterback system again, if they give it to Donnie because he played better, if they give it back to Zeon because he's the starter, if he's injured and we're not hearing about it. I don't know, but this feels like the old adage where if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And I think a lot of people are upset with a lot of things. People are pointing out that, honestly, Houston's got all these great quarterbacks in their backyard. Cam Ward, right, at Miami is from the Houston area, and he isn't at Houston, right? And so that's the way cookie crumbles in that instance. I don't know what the answer is. I would imagine if you go to the highest highs of the season, Zeon Chriss still has that. And so you're going to probably still start with him if he's healthy and ready to go. I think if you keep going back and forth, you're going to potentially break your relationships with all these kids. The real problem is, though, is that they have such different skill sets that you can't run the same offense with any of them. And that means that whatever offense you practice, you're not spending time practicing the other one, right? So if you're going to get better with what Zeon does, well, you're not going to be working on what Donovan does. And we saw today that they don't do the same things, and they don't do them, either one. They both need a lot of practice with the things that they do, right? And it's unfortunately just the problem they're at, and I don't think today solved any of those problems because while it felt like in the late second quarter, you might have gotten, turned Donnie's switch and gotten him ready to roll. By the end of the game, you didn't feel that way either. Well, it felt like 2 weeks ago for the last 2 weeks, you had Zeon Chriss ready to roll. I don't think you leave today's game thinking about that either. And so I feel pessimistic, as optimistic as I tend to be. I feel pretty pessimistic about where the program is at the quarterback spot. And I don't think today did anything but make me feel worse about it. I feel like I've lost listeners in looking at that by saying the little eyeball number at the top. But that's just unfortunately where I am at on it. Now, I want to ask a question about horrible starts. Don't have a lot more time. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you guys today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. They got all kinds of great things right now if you want to focus on the NFL football, where Houston has a good football team, and focus on getting, if you got that hunch in the middle of the game, check the latest stats, etc. They all do it all on the same app where you can place your bet. So get started right now. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So that's FanDuel.com. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, breaking down the game. Talked a little bit about quarterback play. I want to talk to them about the horrible starts consistently. And this is, 4 or 5 games the last couple years. It feels like if Houston kicks off during the daytime on the road, they play poorly. Kansas State a year ago, Cincinnati earlier this year, today. I don't know what the cause of that is. I don't know. It doesn't seem to matter what the coach is, the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, or lack thereof last year. Whoever is in charge, for some reason, this program has trouble with day games on the road. And I think it's a real problem because the more you lose, the more you get slotted into those day games because you're not primetime material. Now, we don't know what time next week's game against Utah is. Well, I guess it's at least at home. It's first home game in a long time for the Coogs. But I do know that strikes me as a mental thing. It's a mental toughness thing, a mental worry. And I worry about where this program goes from there. Because as I look at this roster, again, I look up and down. I guess I could tell myself Mekhi Muse played well. He'll probably be the Locked On Coogs player of the week. I'll double check a couple things defensively before I hand it out. But I don't think there's anyone else even close. Kentrell Webb had a couple nice plays, but he also got beat on a deep ball. I guess Wilson was the closest guy to the play there, but I don't know. The team played really, really terrible. It feels like a big step back in the Big 12, and you were hoping to get to 4, 5, 6 wins after that TCU game kind of helps spur something. Instead, you're watching Colorado beat Arizona big time right now. Baylor is up big on Texas Tech, who was undefeated in conference coming into today. And then I guess earlier today you had Cincinnati beat Arizona State, and then last night you had BYU come back and beat Oklahoma State. So BYU looks they're both undefeated and look really, really good. This is a real problem. Now, as I talk about the Big 12, this is simply not a thing that happens. Black Rain points out they better get together to be back in the G5. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I don't know. The only way that would happen would be if the Big 12 became a Group of 5 conference. That's not how these contracts work. I will say that they could fall to the doldrums, and we've seen teams get stuck in the doldrums of conferences for a long time. But that's just not how things work. And so I don't really think that, outside of mentioning that refreshing, that's not how those things work. It's worth mentioning. I do think, though, that by Friday, I'm going to talk myself into how we're going to beat Utah because it's every week. And B, I do think as a whole that there's a chance that this is a weird game and TCU is more like what this team is. Again, they played pretty well for 3 quarters against Iowa State defensively, played really well against TCU defensively, laid an egg today. Right. We talked before about part of the problem in relying on our defense all the time is there's going to be games where teams have good game plans and figure it out. Jalen Daniels was really good in the past. Maybe that's what this is. I don't know. Even today, he was 16 to 21 for 247 yards. The bigger thing was he was 7 rushes on the ground for 58 yards. So we'll see. I'm not sure a whole lot about what Utah's going on at quarterback, but Jalen Daniels will not be the only dual threat quarterback they play the rest of the way. They got to figure something out. That was a bad football game. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not going to be more positive about it than that. We're breaking it down more this week. Getting the tape tomorrow with the results in hand. Kind of help finish my annotations here and take from there. Locked On Coogs, the Prime of the Locked On podcast. That means your team every day, even on the hard ones where they can't seem to win a football game. Go Coogs.